o'clock, we'll make a start. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Planning Committee meeting. My name is Councillor Tim Ball, I'm Chair of the Committee. I'll now ask Officer Top Table to introduce themselves.
Thank you. I'm Karina Haskins from Democratic Services.
I'm Christopher Griggs-Trefathan. I'm a team manager of the Development Management team.
I'm Charlotte Truman, Senior Solicitor for Bath and North East Somerset Council.
Thank you. Please to remind councillors and members of the public to switch their phones off or put those devices to silent. This meeting is being filmed and recording will be available on the council's website. Anybody speaking does not wish to be filmed should make themselves known to the camera operator. Emergency evacuation procedure, please.
Thank you. If the continuous alarm sounds, you must evacuate the building by one of the designated exits and proceed to the named assembly point. The designated exits are signposted, and from this room you use the main door and then the main exit of the building. And the assembly point is in Orange Grove on the green by the cathedral, Bath Abbey. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, apologies from Councillors Ian Halsall and John Leach.
Thank you. Declarations of interest, any not declared that need declaring this morning? Nobody? Thank you. Urgent business agreed by the Chair. There is no urgent business. Eyes to the public and statements and questions.
Thank you, Chair. Just to remind members of the public speaking about the procedure. So speakers will be called to speak immediately after the planning officer has made their presentation. And the order of speakers and time allowed for speaking will be as follows. First, parish or town council representatives will speak first and be allowed 3 minutes in total. Objectors to an application will be allowed 3 minutes in total. And then supporters of an application will be allowed 3 minutes in total. Any ward councillors not on the committee? I don't think we haven't got any today. So moving on, the speeches will be timed by the traffic light system you can see on the table next to me. At the start, the light will be green and turn to amber when there is 1 minute speaking time remaining. When the light turns red, speakers should immediately conclude their remarks.
Thank you. Minutes of the meeting 17th September and 24th of September. Can I see a move of that? There's a correct record? Looks like silent for a second, please. All those in favour, please? It's clearly carried. Thank you. We now move on the main plans list. I will tell you now. Both of them, yes. We're on the main plans list. I do intend taking a break at or around 11 AM, depending on which application we're on. We'll conclude applications regardless. We're now on the main plan list, the site of former Folly in Brewery. Christine Moore, will you present, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is an application for the erection of a car-free, self-build, affordable dwelling at the site of the former Folly Inn Brewery and Pleasure Grounds on the lane between Hampton Row and Grosvenor Bridge in Bathwick. There's a verbal update, a correction of the heights of the building. The height of the overall height of the building will be at a level of 1.6 metres above the level of the towpath, not as stated in the report. In addition to this verbal update, there's also another verbal update in respect of the update report and policy SCR6, just to clarify that this report has been with the Planning Department for several years now. And so at the time of the consideration and when advice has been given, the scheme is in accordance with SCR6 as previously worded, not as it is at present. The site is located to the north of the canal and to the south of the railway line. It's within the conservation area, the Bath World Heritage Site, and the site of nature conservation interest. The site's not within the Greenbelt. On this slide here, the site which is in the ownership of the applicants is outlined in blue, but the area which is the subject of this planning application in particular is the area outlined in red, where the house will be located, and the red edging indicates the curtilage which will be associated with the property. This aerial photograph from Google Maps is just so that you can get an idea of the location of the site. The red line isn't accurate, it's just for identification purposes. But it's just to show you that the site is within a woodland swathe which runs from Bathampton to Hampton Row. This undated picture was provided by the applicant, and which indicates, we assume, what was on the site. From historic records, it appears that back in the late 1800s, 1880, 1890, the site was used as a pleasure garden with pub and a malt house. But by 1947, the buildings are only indicated as ruins on plans. The applicants have owned the site, I understand, for about 8 years, and these photographs just give an indication of what the site was like when they first took it on. And over the years that they've owned the site, they have uncovered the ruins as shown on these photographs, in the time that they've owned it. There's a small pond on the site, and again, this shows what it was like and how it is today. This block plan indicates where the house will be located. It's in the south-eastern corner of the site, and the plan indicates trees within the site, and as you can see, it's a fairly heavily wooded area. The whole site, within the blue edging, as showed on the initial plan, is now the subject of a TPO. The master plan submitted with the application indicates the house with the garden area outlined, and this plan indicates planting the 33 trees shown there, which are to be planted on the site. The plan actually shows 3 trees to be removed, but my understanding is that there is only an intention to remove 2 trees. A question has been raised, obviously there's a lot of ash trees on the site, so the tree officer did raise the point that there may be a lot of trees that will need to be removed due to dying ash back. Sorry, yes. These are the elevations of the property. So on the left-hand side, we've got the north elevation of the property. The site itself steeps quite steeply down from the canal, which is on the south side, to down to the north. So the north elevation will be at a higher level than the south elevation, which will be on the higher part of the site. I think it's probably a little bit clearer when I show you the side elevations. So here's the side elevations. As you can see, the south elevation is sort of at the top of the slope, whereas the north elevation will be cantilevered out because of the topography of the site. The building will be built of hempcrete, an off-white lime plaster. The roof will be natural slate. There'll be solar panels on the southern roof slope, and there's a 2-metre wide veranda across the northern elevation. The single-storey elements will be constructed of Bath stone. There's a single-storey element at each end of the property. Here's the floor plan. So we have 4 bedrooms, and on the ground floor, living area, kitchen, snug, and bathroom. And this is the roof plan showing the solar panels on the south roof slope. This section I think is helpful as it shows you the topography, and you can see on the left-hand side the canal at the higher level. Then you have part of the verge adjacent to the canal, and then you have the boundary of the site with the property set down. And then as you follow down the hill, you get to the footpath, which is a footpath between Hampton Row and the little bridge which goes through to, Grosvenor, thank you. This is a cross-section going through long ways through the site, and just shows that actually where the house is sited, the site is relatively flat. So as the site goes down the hill, it's fairly flat across, sort of across as it runs parallel to the canal. This section just shows the height so that we can see the top of the ridge, and then the ground floor plan, and you can see how the ground floor plan of the property sits on the slope and then cantilevers out as the site falls away beneath it. Oh, sorry. These plans are just put in just to show, they indicate the habitats existing on the site at the moment, and then showing that the house in there, it's indicated that with the information that's been submitted, the habitats don't change significantly. And here again, we've got the planting scheme. I think I said earlier, there's be 33 new trees planted within the site. This is just so that you can see the extent of the SNCI, Site of Nature Conservation Interest, and the site itself, sorry, I don't know, is sort of at the right-hand, sorry, I can't get a pointer on that. I think you can see where there's the narrow section of the canal, you can see the bridge, where it joins the larger section, and then in there is where the site is located. And this plan just shows where the sites of specific scientific interest are in relation to the site, and these are, it's because of these sites that the HRA is required. Got some photographs now. Obviously, because the site's fairly heavily wooded, it's quite difficult to get photographs, but I hope this gives an indication of what we're looking at. So we're looking at the towpath, looking across, so looking towards the west with the site on our right-hand side, and then the right-hand photograph is looking down towards the site, which is set down below us. To the immediate east of the site is a footpath which steps down, and so you can see across into the site towards the west. So these are the steps that go down, and then the site is over to the left of those railings, and then the next photograph is showing looking across from those railings across to the site. Once you get down to the bottom, you then have the archway of the railway line, and then the footpath turns. You can carry on straight under the railway line, or you can turn left, and then it goes towards Hampton Row. So as you walk along the bottom footpath, which runs along the northern boundary of the site, these are some views into the site, and you can see the lower ruins which have been uncovered. So again, this is walking, so this is the lane along the bottom of the site, along the northern boundary, and these are views of what you see into the site. Once in the site, you can, if you at the bottom end of the site, if you look to the right, there's an area that has a very large tree, and just at the moment there's a trampoline there. And then to the left, there's the ruins, part of the ruins which have been uncovered. As you get to the top of the site, there's a small shed, and there's also the larger ruins which have been uncovered, which are set down in front of where the new dwelling will be located. So this is the top of the site. There's a shed there at the moment which will be included within the curtilage of the property, and then it's just overgrown with some obviously trees along the boundary. So this is looking up into the site, so the house will sit sort of within these views as you look up. So and this is looking from the towpath. You can get down into the site. There's a little staircase, and these are two photographs looking from the stone steps across where the house will sit. The application is recommended for refusal. The reason for refusal are in respect of the following matters: ecology, the Habitats Regulation Assessment, character and appearance, heritage impact, and trees and woodland, impact on the trees and woodland. Thank you.
Thank you. Now for public speakers. Wendy and Tom, you there, please? You have 3 minutes between you.
Thank you for the chance to speak. Our family have lived locally on a boat for the last 18 years. Our 3 children were all born on the canal and now attend local secondary schools. Before we bought the site 8 years ago, it had been used for rough sleeping and fly tipping. Since then, we've removed decades of rubbish, improved biodiversity, and revealed the old buildings. The response has been overwhelmingly positive. The application received 76 letters of support from local residents. We propose a sustainable, off-grid, low-impact home that will secure the long-term care and enhancement of the site. The Bath Preservation Trust considers it a model of sustainable architecture for the district, and a provisional sustainability report rated it as A in energy efficiency.
The house is a modest size for our family of 5 and has been carefully sited to minimise harm to existing trees. Screw pile foundations will prevent damage to the roots of trees located near the building. Only 2 trees out of more than 50 on site would be affected, one of which overhangs a public path. We understand the Arboricultural Officer's concern for future tree protection, but the entire site is already covered by a tree preservation order. This ensures legal protection for every tree. In addition, a landscape and ecology management plan will guarantee ongoing ecological enhancement. 3/4 of the site, outside of the red line, will be designated and legally protected as woodland and actively managed for nature. Natural England, the government statutory advisor on nature conservation, raised no objection following a Habitats Regulation Assessment on condition that mitigating measures are secured. Their conclusion is clear. The proposal will not result in adverse effects on the integrity of any of the sites in question. The choice of materials also reflects our environmental priorities. Hempcrete, our main building material, is carbon negative. Such innovative materials should be encouraged in accordance with the Council's climate change policy. A landscape and visual assessment summarised the development would have negligible impact on users of the footpaths around the site and would even become slightly beneficial due to the agreed tree planting schedule. As the site is situated within the City of Bath and as it is a sustainable development, there should be a presumption in favour unless any adverse impacts would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. In this case, the evidence and professional consultations do not indicate any such level of harm. As the Bath Preservation Trust concluded, the cumulative weight of public benefit would outweigh the less than substantial harm to the character and setting of the Bath Conservation Area and special qualities of the World Heritage Site. We welcome the conditioning of approval, including the removal of permitted development rights, a LEMP and lighting conditions. We believe this proposal represents the best future for the site: sustainable, sensitive, beneficial to Bath's landscape and community, and allowing a local family to live a genuinely low-carbon life. Thank you.
Thank you. Now for questions of officers, please. Anybody? Councillor Simon.
Thank you, yes. My reading of the Natural England response in the update report is that it seems to show that they regard the habitats regulation assessment as satisfactory. So I don't quite understand why your refusal on that ground.
Yes, so what happens is the applicant submitted an HRA, which is then sent to Natural England to assess, and in principle they felt what was being said was acceptable, subject to the council coming to the conclusion that they would be able to condition any development to mitigate any of the issues that had been raised. The advice from our ecologists is that, in fact, the conditions would not, if we were to apply conditions in order to mitigate, and in particularly the issue of light, they may not or could not meet the tests which would be applicable to conditions. And so, therefore, we'd be in a situation where, when the HRA went back to the Natural England, we wouldn't be able, we wouldn't be able to say that we could provide restrictions through the conditions that would satisfy the concerns.
Might I just expand a little bit on that answer? So Christine is absolutely right, but just to elaborate the tests for conditions, there's 6 tests for conditions, one of which is reasonableness, and that's the key one here. And it's felt by officers that a condition restricting any external lighting, because that is what is required by the HRA, in this instance would not be reasonable on a site which is heavily wooded, therefore quite gloomy and dark at the best of times, near a river, for a family home where you would have children on a sloping site. Didn't think, officers' view is that's not a reasonable request to place on a property or development of that nature, and it hasn't really been explained how the dwelling would operate as a residential use without, in a safe and with a safe way, with a reasonable level of amenity, without any external lighting at all, and therefore we didn't feel that we could meet the HRA requirements.
Councillor Crosley.
Thank you. It's sort of a two-part question on the same issue. There is already ruins there from a previous building scheme. Did you explore with the applicants the idea of rebuilding on the existing ruin site? And if so, what were the reasons for choosing a different location within the site as opposed to rebuilding on the ruins?
Rebuilding where the ruins are, or using the ruins and building up from the ruins, has never been a proposal put forward to the council.
So you didn't explore with them other options on the same site? You just took their application site only? Yes. I mean, the application came in. There had been advice beforehand, and the application came in based on what the applicants wish to develop on the site.
Councillor Gawley.
Thank you. Yes, and thank you for your response to my question yesterday about Lewes. I appreciate the detailed advice that you gave. My next question is, could you go back to the image where you can see the building cantilevered out? So that one. Am I right in thinking the only point at the back is the screw piling, and then there's the screw piling underneath the front of the building? Is that where the 2 points on where it connects to the earth, to the ground?
My understanding is that the building is piled, So yes, it will be. It's not enclosed underneath.
Okay, so there's basically an undercroft.
Yes.
Okay. And my question is what the screw piles are going to be made of, and what the base that's been cantilevered out, what they're made of. Sorry, I may have missed this in your report, and I apologise.
I don't actually know the answer to that.
Okay, sorry, I should have asked that.
I know the veranda and all that is timber, and then we've got the hempcrete used for the. Hang on, I'm trying to find.
So it's basically sort of balanced front and back, and nothing underneath.
Yes, that's my understanding.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. So I'm just looking at the issue. It's described as an off-grid construction, which means obviously, from what I understand, there are no external utilities, and it's going to be completely self-contained in terms of all utilities. That's correct, isn't it?
Yes, again, as I understand it, that's what they've shown, and that's what seems to be able to work.
And I couldn't see, and I think we mentioned it during the visit, I can't see any type of viability report that demonstrates that that off-grid design is viable and will be self-contained within its current design, and won't require any further developments going forwards if the current design doesn't work.
As far as looking at what they've submitted, it appears that there is no reason to assume it wouldn't work. I mean, obviously, at a later date, if somebody decided that they wanted to change something, they didn't want to use the water that they can access from a culvert, or they didn't want to use the solar panels, then obviously we'd have to assess if they had to do building works to provide services. We'd have to assess that at the time. But certainly on the basis of what's been submitted, I've got no reason to consider that it couldn't work as it's shown.
Okay, so am I right? Is it, looking at that picture there, the solar panels are facing towards the canal, is that right?
That's right, to the south, yes.
And the thing that's screening the house from the visibility from the people walking on the towpath is the trees that are likely to obscure the solar panels.
Yes, I think at that point, I think maybe the photograph would show it. There is, I mean, there are a couple of trees, and you have got bracken, as you'll have seen, on the verge there, next to the towpath, but it does move away, and obviously the sun won't be coming horizontally, it'll be coming from above. So I think it's, you know, that there's no reason to think that it wouldn't get enough sun to provide what's needed.
Okay, because my concern is either there's enough canopy there to obscure the view of this for people using the towpath, or there is no canopy there, which means the solar panels will work, but you know, and people will be able to see what's there.
Yeah, well, there's at that point, there's only 2 trees, and it's sort of bracken rather than massive trees there. It was sort of fairly heavily vegetated rather than you know, a line of solid trees.
Thank you. Could I ask one more question? I just want to understand there's obviously you've got the blue boundary and the red boundary. The red boundary is also including the towpath as well. What is that designated as? Is that under the ownership of this site, that section of the towpath?
No, they've served notice on the Canal and River Trust, because obviously if works are to be carried out that require the land in the ownership of the Canals and River Trust, then they have to go through another process of getting consents from them for the works being carried out.
Okay. I'm just trying to understand why it's included within the site boundary.
Because as planners, we would need to know how they're going to get access in to get materials and the like to the site.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Councillor Jackson.
Thank you very much. This is only a minor point, really. Well, I'm a bit confused about the design of the building, which is such that somebody like me would not be able to get into it, so it's not really very accessible or sustainable. And why they chose Bath stone when, if the design had been more with timber and looked a bit more rural, it might fit in better. But we've got the Bath stone, and I just wondered why. And as far as I'm concerned, the vital question about boundaries is, where is the housing development boundary? Because it does seem to be quite a way, as far as I could deduce from the site visit, quite away from the nearest house. So housing development boundary, choice of materials, and I think Councillor Hughes has put his finger on a vital question about sustainability. I have a question there. But my niggle is the effect on the amenity of the people using the towpath. Not so much during the construction site, we always had that issue, but just ordinarily, because Councillor Ball and I sat there, and a number of bikes and walkers and dog walkers on a Monday morning was quite striking. So I was wondering what the impact of this dwelling would be on people who were strolling along on a Saturday afternoon.
Shall I answer your question? The stone is used on the two small side elevations, as I've shown, and the pantry needs to be stone in order to keep it cool. So that's why stone's been used on there, but that's the only section, so it's the lower small side extensions. So the rest of the property is the hempcrete. You asked about the housing development boundary. This site is considered to be within the built environment of Bath, so in principle residential development is acceptable subject to all other development control policy considerations. And you mentioned the amenity, and yes, I mean, it's recognised that obviously it's a busy towpath which a lot of people use, so there would be an issue there that, there would be times when the towpath would have to be closed in order for materials to be brought into the site. But again, that would be an agreement with the Canals and River Trust through a construction management plan.
Councillor McPhee.
How will the sewage be dealt with?
Yes, actually, the agent sent me quite a useful sort of full description of how the water and sewage, if that's okay, I'll just read it out. The compost toilet system, there's two types which can be used, and they've mentioned both. And it says the building is raised above the bank, and the floor makeup means that there is in fact a substantial drop because they're going to use the compost toilet. So there's a drop between the base of the toilet, which can be on a plinth internally, and the ground level, so then that will accommodate a compost toilet. So there's a sufficient drop to install a low container for the solid waste externally. A separate system does not need an internal container, and it's emptied from within the building, so they can actually clean it out from the building. Under the two systems which could possibly be used, waste will be stored in a sealed container for composting in situ before being spread under shrubs and garden area in accordance with the Environment Agency rules. And both systems, they've confirmed or state, comply with building regs and have a very low water use.
Councillor Simon.
Trees, it was mentioned that just 2 trees will need to be felled, but what assessment's been made of their condition?
Sorry, could you say that again?
What assessment has been made of the condition of the trees that need to go?
Well, the Council's Arboriculturist had a look. I mean, I don't think in principle there's an objection to the trees that were shown to be removed. And also it was flagged up that other trees, because of the ash dieback, may need to be removed from the site. I think the concerns are that obviously trees grow, There's a lot of trees on the site, and there is the potential for, as trees grow and people are living on the site, then there is a pressure potentially for trees to be requested to be removed because of the impact that they then are having on the living conditions, or in fact the built form itself.
Okay, any more questions, anybody? Right. Yes, now open debate. Councillor Simons Ward, Councillor, you're entitled to open debate.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is an imaginative proposal that needs to be taken on its own terms, and I'd like to start by commending the owners for rescuing a historic site. I think it's important that Bath Preservation Trust give considerable weight to the public benefits, and I'd like to adopt their submission, and also that it's their submission that it's previously developed land. I think that one of the best ways of preserving this historic remnant of Bath is to bring the site into residential use. I'm confident that the owners would be happy to show people the ruins, perhaps part of Heritage Open Days. I don't think that the tree argument holds up. The two specimens that have to go, the arborist is not objecting to that. The fact that trees may need some management on site, I don't think is a reason to object to this. The character and appearance of this property, I don't think is out of character with a house in the woods. From the point of view of people coming along the towpath, it will, yes, they will be able to see that there is a building there. They'll see a slate roof with solar panels up to about chest height, 1.26 metres. I don't think that's obtrusive, and I don't think it detracts from the character and appearance of the towpath or its heritage value. In terms of the habitats regulations, to say that the conditions that would need to be applied in order to make the habitat effects acceptable are unreasonable when they are conditions to which the applicants are proposing to agree, seems to me in itself unreasonable. I think we have to remember that most people living along the canal are used to approaching their properties in the dark. They would perhaps use bike torches, head torches, but I don't think that canal dwellers necessarily rely on external lighting in the way that others do. They approach dark adapted with an understanding of how they wish to live. And I think that to object on the reasonableness grounds of the enforceability isn't a sound way of going. The fact that Natural England have said in principle we can agree, I think is the starting point, and then we need to find appropriate mechanisms for making that workable, and that may in fact involve some covenants that run with the land or some similar solution, but I think we need to solve that problem. In terms of the impact on the ecology of the area, I think that building the house, apart from the temporary impacts during construction phase, will be minimal. I think that the owners have shown themselves to be very good stewards of this patch of land and have cleaned it up, as we saw from the pictures, have removed the loudspeakers. There are plenty of patches along the canal that are not in the same good condition, and I think the ecological impacts will be minimal and will be managed by the applicants in the way that we would look for in terms of our traditions. Then I note that they're proposing to agree to LEMP. I like the use of hempcrete as the material, and I think a little bit of bath stone to produce a cooler pantry is a sensible way forward. So I think that the materials are accessible. So overall, I don't think that there's an insuperable objection to this application, and I'm going to move that we delegate to permit. If the officers feel there's anything that they need further guidance from committee on, no doubt they'll bring it back to committee. But I'd like to propose that we delegate to permit.
Do I have a seconder first? Councillor McPhee.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Simons. There's quite a bit to go through, so apologies if this goes on a little bit, but just want to be very clear about the motion. First of all, thank you for, you have gone through the reasons for refusal in the report and given some commentary on each, but can I just, to be absolutely clear, because in cases where we're overturning an officer recommendation, which is a significant objection from officers, this is not a one-issue type thing, there is a public law duty for the committee to give adequate and intelligible reasons. So apologies if I sound like I'm repeating what you've said.
We need to be able to spell them out.
That's absolutely fine. So, on the, I'll sort of do it in reverse order a little bit, but on the ecology point, you've suggested that you think the impacts will be minimal, and that actually having stewards on the site will help with the management maintenance of that site and the wider site. Obviously, one comment I would just make is that planning permission runs with the land, not to the person, so there's no guarantee that in the future these people will, this particular applicant will be living at this site. But we would need to think about how we would condition that. And one test as well that is in the policy that would need to be addressed is because there is some harm to the SNCI through the construction of a building on what is otherwise an ecological site at the moment, there has to be material considerations to outweigh that harm. And I take it from what you've said, you think the benefits of this proposal outweigh that harm. So I just want to check that's your reasoning there.
And what I didn't mention was 5-year land supply.
Okay. I've heard your comments about the design and character, and that is a matter of judgment, so that is fine. On the heritage impacts, officers have concluded that there is some harm to the sort of heritage assets in this case. I believe the conservation area, and I'll double check. But can I be clear? Are you saying you don't think this proposal would harm, so you disagree with that assessment, or you think there is some harm, but that is outweighed by the public benefits of this scheme?
I think there's harm at the very lowest level of harm, but it's outweighed by the preservation of a significant asset in terms of the old inn and by the other wider public benefits of constructing a property.
Thank you. And just on the tree impacts, again, I think you were reasonably clear on this, but I just want to clarify. So, as I said, I don't think the tree officer has an objection to the loss of the 2 trees proposed to be lost, but it is about the future management of trees on the site and the pressures arising from residential occupation of that site. Just to be really clear with members of the committee, I know it's been stated there is a TPO on the site. That does mean permission would have to be sought to do any works or to remove any trees. But experience has shown us, well, in fact, it's very hard for us to resist applications for those if there is a property on the site which is having its amenity or its safety impacted. So it would be very hard for us to resist those. But again, I believe what you've said is you feel that the applicants, again, not necessarily the applicants will be living in this property forever, as it runs with the land, but the applicants will, you know, that you don't feel that that issue would arise of conflict between trees and the property. That's based on your judgment of the design of the property and the position with the trees and those things. But could you perhaps just expand a little bit on that?
I certainly don't think there would be any potential harms due to need for amenity changes to the tree cover. I suppose there is a risk of the need for safety-based assessment of trees, but I think that could be secured by replacement planting and would in any case engage human rights issues, which I think would outweigh the concerns about any safety-related changes to the trees.
Okay, thank you. And then final one, you'll be glad to hear, and then the debate can continue. Around the habitat regulations assessment. Now, this is quite a crucial one, just in terms of ensuring that the committee make a lawful decision, because the habitat regulations assessment is a separate piece of legislation, and it's not just a straight balancing exercise that we ordinarily do. So on this case, I think, as we've said, we're concerned that the conditions or obligations that would be required to meet the terms of the habitat regulations assessment, primarily, there's several things, but primarily the one around no external lighting, would not be reasonable in this context and therefore wouldn't meet the tests of conditions. I took it, and again, I just wanted to reiterate, you said you did feel it was reasonable in these circumstances, and again, I just make the point that the permission runs with the land, not directly to the applicants, but your feeling was that the conditions and obligations could be done reasonably to ensure that the habitat regulations mitigation is secured. That's right.
I think the argument I understood it was about a specific condition about external lighting. Mm-hmm. I would regard a condition that forbade external lighting as reasonable in this context.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that boat dwellers might be used to approaching things.
If other conditions are needed,
mm-hmm.
It's difficult to know what. But I think if the question is a ban on external lighting, which is needed to meet the HRA, reasonable, I would urge the committee to say yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to make one final piece of advice, really, regarding the motion. You suggested it would be delegate to permit, because obviously there are a range of matters here that would need to be considered by officers, and more than ordinarily when we're sort of talking about delegate to permit. And I'd actually suggest that the motion is amended to a deferral, so that officers can, particularly on this HRA point, because it comes to the lawfulness test, can seek a detailed LEMP, which is Landscape Ecological Management Plan. We don't have a detailed one, and that's quite crucial for how these mitigations are going to be actually achieved on site, and that's a missing point. Two, some suggested conditions or planning obligations that officers can prepare around how those mitigations will be secured, so that the committee have all the information about what those look like, and then can come to a firm view on whether it's reasonable to apply those. And finally, to give the applicant opportunity to address that sort of conflict and see if there's any further justification they want to provide around how those mitigation measures would be secured in a reasonable way. So that's my recommendation, and I've taken the notes on all the other points. And I'm just going to check. Apologies for the length of time I've been talking.
I'm in the committee's hands on this. If somebody else feels that deferral would be if somebody else feels that deferral would be better. But the reason I'm putting forward delegate to permit is that if it's possible to reach agreement that suits the applicant and the officers, then it can be granted. But if the officers have any concerns, they could bring it back to committee, and it would be, in that sense, it's a provisional decision. There's delegated authority to grant a planning permission, but if that authority concerns the officers, they can refer it back to committee. But I'm in the committee's hands on that.
Yeah, I mean, in certain circumstances where there are simple matters to change, and it's quite obvious to officers how we might want to permit in line with an officer, in line with a committee decision. I think there are just too many matters here that we would, you know, I feel like what we would be presenting to you next time might look very different in terms of the list of conditions and the considerations that you would therefore be making. So my strong recommendation is a deferral, so that you can come back with that information and committee can then make the decision in light of that information.
In which case, the reason I'm slightly concerned is that that doesn't constitute a decision that we think that this is in principle acceptable. And I'd like to find a form of words that says the committee is minded to think that a house in this location can be acceptable, and refers it to the officers for preparation of conditions. Would that be an acceptable form of motion?
I think the issue would be if it came back to committee, whether by a deferral or via delegate to permit, and officers couldn't reach agreement, is that you can't fetter a decision that the committee might make at that committee with this committee.
I don't think minded to, subject to legal advice, is fetters a later decision if further information arrives.
Yeah, I think that is correct. There is a principle of consistency, but so long as it's reconsidered with an open mind, an initial indication is not necessarily a substantive decision, and if it gets deferred, the application deferred at subsequent meeting for further consideration, leaving all options open, it is possible to do so.
Okay, so what I will move, if my seconder agrees, is that we defer this application on the understanding the committee is minded to think it acceptable, but will reconsider in the light of the package of conditions to be brought forward.
Councillor P, you happy with that? I've got a lot of you to speak anyway in a second. You're all down. Councillor P, you happy with that? Yeah. Okay. Councillor Jackson, you're next. Seconded, yes. Councillor Jackson, you're next.
I was hoping we'd get a bit clearer on the legal situation, and I think I think the applicants have shown very commendable commitment to this site and the way they've tried to improve it and so on, that they perhaps would not be too unhappy with with 2 or 3 months deferral to sort things out. And also, going through the papers, there are quite a lot of inconsistencies between one bit of evidence and another bit, and it would be quite helpful if those could be ironed out as well while we're doing it. But I think we have to also consider the fact that quite a few of these reports are incomplete and don't allow for circumstances that might arise with climate change and so on, that we should indeed, as the officer suggests, look at it with an open mind the second time round. If it had been permit in principle, we'd be in a different situation. But given the package we've got in front of us on the table, I think a deferral is the only reasonable approach to take. And I won't get onto the subject of composting toilets at this stage.
Councillor Hughes. Are you before Councillor Gawley? Thank
you. I'll take it. I will get onto the subject of composting toilets. I commend the applicants for their dedication to this space and for their attempt to make an ecologically friendly building. And there's huge amounts about the habitats and the trees and so on. My concerns are about the actual practical building. I mean, I want to know what the floor slab's made of, if it's going to be balanced on either side, how you lay hempcrete. Is there some sort of a frame in which it's laid? I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I think is missing in this. And it concerns me if this floor slab is sort of suspended mid-air, how cold it's going to be underneath. I am concerned about the composting toilets. I mean, I totally understand when you're a canal dweller, you're used to dealing with toilets, that's fine. But this house is going to be for other people potentially in the future, and they may not want to deal with that yet. You can't put this on mains drainage because it's too far, so therefore do you have a septic tank? How is that going to be dealt with in the future if you can't get a lorry there to maintain it? So there are a lot of concerns that I have with this building, regardless of where it is. I mean, it's a concern. It's on the side of the canal and there's potential slippage and therefore there's got to be piling. But it's how this actually works now and in the future that gives me the greatest amount of concern. And I totally get that why the family want to live here and the fantastic work they have done. But this house is for the future. It's not just for them. And that really concerns me about how it practically works.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. I mean, it almost felt like the conversation over there was turning it into a permission in principle, changing the whole application. I mean, my opinion is that I think the officer has done a very comprehensive assessment of this, particularly with areas like the habitat regulations. And I think she's come to the right conclusion. I think this is an unacceptable impact for appearance and character. I think for the habitat and for the heritage. I think for all four of those. I think for me is unacceptable. I'm concerned that the viability hasn't been demonstrated. That this will function the way that it's proposed to function as an off-grid development. So for those reasons, I won't be supporting the motion.
Councillor Warren.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I mean, we've heard a lot of talk about how the house is going to be built, etc., etc. I think that's in some ways irrelevant because there are ways and means of building anything nowadays, so I can't see the issues with that. But I think just to bring it back to where we are, we've got a bit of ground by the side of a canal with an old ruin in it. And the applicants have tidied it up and it looks great. Basically formed a nice garden there. You live in the boat, but a nice garden there, which I'm all for that. However, does it give you the right to build a house there? You know, I think I kind of go along with Sean here. I think the case officer's done a great job. And, I mean, to me, it's not an appropriate place to build a house, I'm afraid, and that's just my thoughts on this.
Councillor Crosley.
This is really one of the most interesting applications I think we've faced in recent years. And as I've listened to the debate, I actually remember going with Councillor Kumar down to this site back in 22 and having a look at it with him before he put in his call-in request. And certainly my views have switched backwards and forwards about whether it's acceptable or it's unacceptable. But I think Councillor Simon put through a really well-reasoned set of thoughts and considerations on this. And I'm actually, I think the officer is correct that this is such a difficult site that if we are to ask our case officers to work on it with an assumption to find a way to permit it, then that should come back to this committee for further consideration. So as I say, my views have changed backwards and forwards. I cycle, walk, run along the towpath frequently, and I cycle, walk and run down that little slipstream to the bridge that takes you through to Grosvenor and Larkhall as well on frequent occasions. And it wasn't till I'd been doing this walk several times that I actually noticed the buildings in there, the stones. I wasn't looking beforehand. And there are other interesting mounds and constructions around in this area that have happened over time and have all been sort of under the radar. For those of you who don't know, there was once a very good Tumps riding course which doesn't seem to be used anymore. So there's a lot of things in here, and we have to commend all the work that's going on in this, both from the applicant's point of view and from the case officer's point of view. But my current situation is that I am inclined to agree with Councillor Simon that this is a very interesting application. I would like to add one further consideration, that if we are minded to approve, I think we should take away any rights for the owners of this house to be part of any residence parking scheme that comes in on either side of the river and canal towpath there, because the whole point about this is that it is car-free, and therefore I think we should emphasise that by saying it is car-free and you will not be able to apply for any residence parking zone in the future, because I think one thing's for certain is that residence parking zone will eventually cover the whole of Bath and probably the whole of Bath and North East Somerset, actually. So that is my one extra thought about it, but I think this is an interesting thing, and I look forward to the reconsideration with a mind to permit when the case officer has gone through all the issues that have been raised in the debate.
Councillor McPhee, you seconded. Do you want to speak? No. Okay, now Councillor Simon to sum up then, please.
Thank you, yes. Effectively, what I'm inviting the committee to do is vote for my motion if you think this can be made acceptable, vote against it and go for the officer's recommendation if you can't, and you think we need to give it quietus now. But I hope that people will join me. One specific point about Councillor Crossley's point about parking. My understanding is that the residential parking zone rules would exclude them anyway, so it may be no more needed than an informative that they wouldn't be able to get a parking zone. And there is a proposal to extend parking zones to Grosvenor Bridge and beyond. So that is an active issue, but I don't think they will get a parking permit anyway, but even if they wanted one, which I don't think they do. So I'm happy to move to the vote.
Okay, you're on a motion to defer at the moment, taking into account you summed up already. It's a legal question, fine.
Is it legal to permit a dwelling which is not accessible for anyone who has a back injury or any kind of health problem and wouldn't be able to get up those steps?
Do you have an answer at all?
The equalities legislation that comes at the end of the officer's report.
The officer's report, I think, said no public sector equality duty is engaged, and if that's their assessment, I have... as in, it is an acceptable site. It doesn't breach the public sector equality duty. That's the recommendation of the officer applying the policy to the site.
Okay, we spent quite a long time on this item already. I think rightly so as well. You will motion to defer to bring back to committee a further report in the future, taking on board the point made by committee today. Can I see those in favour, please? That's 4. Those against? That's 4. That falls. I've used my casting vote on this issue to actually... No. My casting vote will be to defer. So that defer is carried. We are now going to take a 10-minute break because we've spent a long time on this item, and we'll come back and conclude afterwards. And he's missing, but missing your officer presentation. He won't take part in this item. I'm now going to call the officer, Danielle Wilson, to present the report.
Thank you, Chair. So this is item 2 on the agenda, which relates to the front of the property known as Windy Ridge, which is sited along the High Street in Wellow. The proposal is for the erection of a 3-bed dwelling within that front garden area. The site is located within the conservation area, national landscape, and within the green belt. So just a verbal update before we go into the presentation. There is just this standard paragraph missing from the committee report, which sets out the duty under Section 66 of the Planning, Listed Buildings and Conservation Areas Act, which basically concludes that there is the assessment of the listed building and its setting is concluded to not be harmed by this development.
Danielle, Councillor Curtis Richard, can you repeat what you just said, please, so he can take part, otherwise he's excluded. We started the debate, Paul, technically you'd be excluded, but Danielle will repeat what she just said for you, so you take part, okay?
I'll go back to the start, it's okay. So item 2, this is the application to the front garden area of Windy Ridge, which is sited in Wellow. The application is for the erection of a 3-bed dwelling within that front garden. The site is located within the Greenbelt, Conservation Area and National Landscape. A verbal update before we go into the presentation. This is a paragraph which is missing from the committee report, which sets out the duty under Section 66 of the Planning and Listed Building Conservation Area Act, which concludes that the setting of the listed building adjacent has been considered and concluded that there is no harm arising from the development on that setting. So, site location plan, the site is outlined in red. We can see a property known as Windy Ridge to the back of the site. That is a single-storey property. So the site is forward of that with the High Street running along the south, West End cottages to the east and Hungerford Terrace to the west. And then just an aerial view there where you can see the kind of long front garden area which separates the terraces on either side. So this sets out the heritage context for the site. The site and location of the dwelling is indicated by the red star. The property to the south, highlighted in blue in this image, is the Grade 2 listed building. The orange terrace, known as West End cottages, is highlighted in the conservation area character appraisal for Wellow, which is where this map is taken from. And that cottage is highlighted because of its contribution to the conservation area. So we have some site plans on the left. We've got the existing and proposed on the right. So the dwelling is kind of sited up the length of the garden. The central area is a dual pitch roof, and then to the west and to the rear we have some 2-storey flat roof sections as well. To the rear there are a couple of outbuildings proposed, one to include the bike store workshop and another garden store, and then parking is to the rear. Access is proposed to be widened to allow for suitable visibility. This is the existing and proposed street scene, so along the High Street. Obviously at the bottom we've got the proposed. That dashed line which is shown on the proposed street scene is the outline of the previous approval, which is an extant scheme for the site for a single dwelling. And that just gives some context in terms of heights for the previous approval, the proposed, and then in relation to the terraces either side. So we have the ground floor plan on the left, so you can see the length which runs up the site, and then the projecting area to the west, some rear landscaping to create a little courtyard and rear garden areas. And then on the right we have the first floor, which shows the 3 bedrooms proposed. And here we have some elevations. So this is the south elevation presented on the left of the slide, which is the elevation that would front the High Street. And then on the right is the rear elevation. The materials are listed there, but just to clarify, because the materials have changed through this application, what is now proposed is there to be different coursings of limestone and some bath stone projecting kind of plinth areas. And then we have the side elevations. So at the top we've got the east, and bottom we've got the west. Again, limestone in different coursings. And then just the outbuildings, garden store, bike store, which would be sited in the rear garden. This is just to show the extant permission. There has been 2 permissions on site for a dwelling of this nature. This one is the latest one, which is still live and could be implemented. And then just some site photos. So this is the site in question. The location of the garage is kind of the front portion of the site where the dwelling's proposed, and then it would run up the length of the garden. To the rear, in the background there, you've got the property known as Windy Ridge. We've got the Hungerford terrace to the left of the image, and then we can see the side gable end of the West End cottages as well. And then just a closer up view of the existing garage there, and you can see the elevation of the ground level. This is the West End cottages referred to previously of being of note, highlighted within the conservation area appraisal. And then this is the gap between those terraces. So obviously on the right we've got the West End cottages as well. So the site would be on our left. We are looking down the high street towards the east. Behind this kind of garage space is the listed building behind West End cottages on our left. And then just turning 90 degrees, so this is the looking south, the Great listed property is here. This is an indicative visual that has been provided by the applicants to show the proposed dwelling. There you can see its front-facing gable, the use of limestone and various design elements. Officer recommendation is to refuse the application. The first reason for refusal is its impact on due to its form, citing scale massing, it is considered that the design does not respond to the character and appearance of that area or its local context. The second reason for refusal is in relation to the heritage asset as the conservation area, which is identified as lesser substantial harm with no public benefit to outweigh that harm. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 2 public speakers. The first public speaker was Councillor Michael Clarkson. Okay, time starts now.
Chair, councillors, good morning. I'm Mike Clarkson. I'm a Wellow Parish councillor, and I'm speaking in support of Mr. Rayner's application. When deciding to support the application, the Parish Council's only concern was the choice of orange brickwork as part of the external surfaces, and we note that Mr. Rayner has taken our comments into consideration. The proposed dwelling replaces a rather ugly garage, and its design, although modern, incorporates features which are typical of our conservation village. The buildings on either side consist of Victorian cottages and post-war social housing and are without any great architectural merit. Therefore, the new design doesn't detract from the immediate surroundings. The west end of the village contains an eclectic mix of older and modern designs, and we feel that the proposed dwelling, which incorporates a number of 21st century environmental benefits, adds to the interest and diversity of that part of the village. Wellow Parish Council is keen to encourage the construction of additional family dwellings within the constraints of infill and the housing development boundary. Therefore, we urge the committee to permit the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Simon Rayner. Okay, your time starts.
Thank you, Chair. Just before I start, I've brought along a simple model which members may wish to look at. If they feel it's helpful, you're welcome to pass it around just to help understand the kind of massing of the scheme. So I'm both the applicant and the architect for the scheme, and the application's for a family home for our own use. Wellow is a lovely village with a strong community, and so we're very aware of our kind of responsibility to create a special building which respects its context, and have agonised over the design for many months. We're keen to create something with real architectural merit which also meets kind of modern living requirements and environmental standards. The built environment of Wellow is characterised by simple forms and a kind of material palette of buff coloured limestone and terracotta roof tiles. But within this visual language, the village contains a wide range of architectural styles and details. Most buildings are oriented with their eaves parallel to the street, but this kind of built fabric is punctuated by some that have their gables facing the street. The proposed house is contemporary, but in a kind of quiet, conservative way, which responds respectfully to its context. It consists of a pair of simple volumes, and the larger, kind of more dominant volume, which you can see on the model, has a pitched roof. It's set back behind the line of West End Terrace, and it has a stepped front elevation with a narrow gable end facing the street, the idea being that both of these reduce its visual impact compared to the existing consent. In terms of materials, it's constructed of rough limestone walls and terracotta tiles, which complement the surroundings. And the vertically proportioned windows are intended to echo the shapes of Georgian and Victorian houses in the village. The stone fins on either side of the windows are to provide shading to help prevent overheating for environmental reasons in the summer, but they're also repeated on the elevations to kind of add some texture and visual interest and create a kind of a subtle contemporary appearance. And they also kind of echo the stone mullions of traditional buildings whilst giving it a distinctive character. The only policy issue that's been raised is in relation to the appearance of the proposals. The case officers argued that the proposals do not contribute positively to local character and distinctiveness. I would argue the opposite. The design is intended as a careful, considered response to the site and the village it sits in. It's a product of its context, which complements its surroundings. And it's an appropriate building which also meets the demands of creating a low-energy, zero-emissions home which is adapted to a changing climate and modern needs. And I'm really pleased that the local community has agreed with that. The proposals, as you've heard, have been supported by the parish council and also by neighbouring residents. So I just urge you to respect the local community's views and to permit this development. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from officers, please? Anybody? Councillor Jackson.
I think the last speaker has raised an interesting question, and I was wondering if I could possibly have it explained to me. I'm sorry, it's a question I've asked before. Less than substantial harm in plain Yorkshire just means there isn't a very damaging impact. But the officer has taken the opposite view, that because there's less than substantial harm, it's contrary to policy, and I don't understand it. Can somebody explain to me the significance of less than substantial harm and what constitutes it?
Danielle, can you do it?
Yeah, so less than substantial harm, that wording comes from the MPPF. It is a categorisation of harm, and less than substantial harm is the categorisation of the least amount of harm in the context of levels of harm. The MPPF specifies substantial harm, etc. Just because it's less than doesn't mean that there is no harm. It is, just on that lower end of harm, and that's the wording that the MPPF uses.
And I'd just add to that even a low level of harm, the MPPF and the legislation that Danielle referred to earlier, and also in her report about conservation areas, requires you to give great weight to any harm to a heritage asset. So even if it's a low level of harm, you should still be giving that matter considerable importance and weight.
Councillor Gawley?
Yeah, I'm a bit confused by the various references to orange brick and ceramics and so on. Could you show me what currently is the plan for that, and how much of the building is due to have those?
So the references to orange brick and other materials were initially proposed with this application. Those materials have changed and are no longer proposed. So we have the list of proposed materials on the screen, with elevations primarily consisting of limestone in different coursings. So there is no orange brick proposed anymore.
I see there's a reference though to ceramic tiles. Where's that going to be?
That is 2C. If I can find 2C, there it is. So that is, 2C is labelled here, so we follow this up next to the front door. A small section.
Okay, any other questions to anybody? Councillor Simon?
Thank you. If there is an extant permission which we judge also might cause less than substantial harm to a heritage asset, are we looking at the increased level of harm or the total level of harm that in assessing any impact on the conservation area and heritage asset?
Yes.
What I would say, Councillor Simons, is that you judge this application on its own merits. So I wouldn't, whilst it's helpful to see what is on, what has been approved previously, and there is a obviously consistency is an important material planning consideration for the council, but this must be acceptable on its own merits if it's to be approved, and as officers are recommending, we don't believe it is.
Councillor Jackson?
This proposed dwelling is in the Wellow Conservation Area, is it not? So should we not rather be considering whether it preserves and enhances the conservation area, which I will, when we go to debate, will argue that it does.
Yep, that is the test that the officers have carried out and concluded that the proposed design does not preserve or enhance the conservation area. The report does set out what the conservation area character appraisal discusses, which is the hierarchy of the street and the building typologies. What was set out in the presentation is the note that is given to the terraces to the east, which are non-listed but are of significant contribution to that conservation area and its setting. So officers have concluded that the design does not contribute or preserve the conservation area, therefore resulting in less than substantial harm.
Any further questions, anybody? Councillor Hughes?
Thank you. I'm just trying to tie up the visual that you showed us with the actual plan. So you showed us a visual which indicates that the house is set back away from the road, the access road. Is that, I'm just trying to figure out the distance between the house and that wall, or how far away it's set away from the road. Because that plan there...
I don't have the exact distances. However, the front elevation is here, which is that gable end, and then the very front of the West End cottages you can see in the corner where my cursor is. So it is set back very slightly from that front elevation and aligns with the kind of access route, that side elevation.
It's worth also noting that the visualisation is not an accurate, accurate visual representation. It's not been sort of done as like an LVIA. It's just a visualisation, CGI visualisation. So we can't confirm its accuracy.
I accept that, but is the access, the side access from this house, going straight onto the road, or is there a pathway and then the road? Because that sort of, to me, indicates. Is that indicating that the side door goes straight onto the road? But the visualisation shows that there's a pathway that runs alongside that separates the house from the road.
I think that visual does appear to be like that. It gives that indication. It may just be the case that the different coursings are kind of the walls retained and then it goes into the side elevation. What is proposed is that side elevation runs completely along the access route. It is an access route, it's not a road.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Simon.
Sorry, I should have asked this earlier. Did this go to a design review panel, or did the officer suggest that it should go to a design review panel?
It did not go to design review panel, and that wasn't a suggestion by officers. Yeah.
Okay, we're now open to debate. Councillor Gawley, your ward councillor, you are open to debate.
Yeah, thank you. It's an interesting one, isn't it? I think I acknowledge the support that Wellow Parish Council have given this, and there are other modern buildings within the village constructed very recently. So I accept all this. I noticed that the applicant has changed the design in response to some of the concerns, particularly removing the amount of ceramic brick there is. My concern with this is the siting. It may be level with West End cottages, but it's not level with Hungerford Terrace, which is to the left-hand side. And I think the impact on them will be quite considerable, and you can't really see it from this angle, but it sits very much forward, very much proud of them. So I'm worried about their immunity. I'm also concerned about the actual bungalow, Windy Ridge, and the impact on that. I'm slightly confused as to why the two are not coming forward together, but nevertheless, the fact that there's going to be a large house in front of Windy Ridge, which impacts its amenity, impacts its outlook, and so on. So, whilst I think that the design is fine, I'm worried about the siting of it and the impact on Hungerford and on Windy Ridge.
Okay, Councillor Simon, you would next. So, who's indicating? Anybody indicating? Councillor Jackson.
Well, I can appreciate Councillor Gurley's concerns, but the site visit was extremely useful. We did, of course, all walk up as far as the bungalow and looked down towards the village. But if you were standing with your back to the listed or heritage buildings and looked up the hill, or were just going for a little walk around to shake down your what you had imbibed at the nearby listed hostelry, I think it's a great improvement. You've got an extremely tatty garage. You've got a typical of its age bungalow sat very prominently at the back of the area, and having this well-designed modern building there, I think actually is a positive contribution to the conservation area and does fulfil the requirement to preserve and enhance the area, and also makes it more interesting. I mean, if everything was in Victorian brick, or the White Louse version, you know, that comes in some areas, it wouldn't be half as interesting. There was a great controversy when the Pompidou Pyramid was deposited on a street in Paris, which was basically Second Republic, i.e. Victorian. But it actually, I was amazed, it worked well. You thought, aha, interesting. And I think it would be the same here. As you walk up that slope, you think, interesting. And ignore the bungalow at the back, which certainly is less than a substantial harm to the area.
Councillor Jackson, you move in approval?
Oh, I would move approval, yes.
And obviously you're saying there's no
I'm
substantial
saying
harm.
that it does make a positive contribution to the conservation area. It might not be what we want, but it...
Okay.
And of course it's adding another... I don't know if you can put this one in. I mean, it is another house knocking off one off the total that we've got to find under the local plan. So Wellow has had a very constrained history of development. The population has remained pretty stable for the last 50 or more years, and to give the chance of a reasonable dwelling for a family is, by my definition, okay. I forgot one question though. There is, I presume, a car space. Was it right that it's underneath? Because the point is, it's not a sustainable location. There's only one bus a week into Bath, community run, for people to do their shopping.
There's 2 parking spaces proposed at the back.
Please do, thank you.
Oh, I see. Now I've got it. Yeah, beg your
Okay, do you have a seconder? Councillor Simon?
I'm not going to directly second Councillor Jackson's motion at the moment, but I do support her approach. But I have concerns about committee members who are not qualified architects in taking views about architectural merits. I also would understand that we would have to delegate permit. It wouldn't be a direct permission because there will need to be a suite of conditions. I'm supporting Councillor Jackson's wish that we give a green light to this, but I'm going to invite her to agree that we defer a consideration for referral to a design review panel to see if the concerns of officers can be mitigated, and in any case to agree conditions. And I would certainly ask her to change her motion to be delegate to approve if she's not with me on deferral for the design review panel.
Do I have a seconder for the motions moved? Councillor Warren?
Yeah, happy to second this. I'm not quite sure what the last conversation is all about, really. We're looking for a seconder. I'm just a bit concerned about it. You talk about being an architect. If we're an architect, do we all have to be architects to sit on the planning committee? Because every time we're here on every floor, we discuss things. But the situation of the house, again, I believe there's already planning for something there. So it's a case of what's there, do you like what you don't? I think along these lines, the parish council are happy. They're representing all the local parishioners, and I'm quite happy to second Councillor Jackson's move.
Councillor Hughes?
Thank you. Well, I can first, to a certain extent, I agree with Councillor Jackson that it would be an improvement on what's currently there. Whether interesting is a factor, I'm not sure. I mean, there's lots of interesting architecture around. I don't know if I necessarily approve of it. But I do agree with Councillor Gawley on this one, which I think the siting of this is wrong. I think its relationship with Hungerford Terrace is not good. I think it will be a loss of amenity there. I find it, because it's so far forward, I find it quite overbearing in its height and structure. If it were set back in line with Hungerford Terrace, I think it would be more acceptable. But in its current form, I don't like this current layout, so I won't be supporting it. I'll be going with the officer's recommendations.
Councillor Crossley?
Thank you. I think Sean Hu has really summed up my concerns about this application as well, and that it needs to be in line with Hungerford Terrace. And if it was in line with Hungerford Terrace, then I would be supporting it. I think the reason I'm not supporting it is because it's not in line, and I think therefore the detraction on the amenity for Hungerford Terrace is a material consideration. And so I will be supporting the officer recommendation to refuse.
Any further speakers? Councillor McPhee?
Yes, I agree with the last two speakers and will oppose the motion.
Councillor Jackson, you're summing up.
I know you shouldn't make this personal, but I do feel that after 16 years on this committee, and with a son who has whose actual profession is doing these visualizations, these constructions, how he earns his living, and what I know about his work, I feel I am entitled to a judgment, whether I'm a qualified architect or not, which I am not. And I think it's a great pity if this is thrown out because of it being a bit further forward than Hungerford Terrace, which I agree, it will have an impact, there's no question about it. But you have to weigh the balances, weigh the pros and the cons. And I think on balance, weighing everything up and the fact that it will make a contribution to the conservation area, we should be supporting this one.
Okay, we're going on a vote for motion to approve. We'll delegate to approve.
So is it...
Yeah, we're delegate to approve. It's delegate to approve, yeah, okay. Those in favour of delegate to approve? That's four of us in favour. 4 in favour. Those against? 3 against. Those abstaining? That is carried. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda now. And we're looking at James Lane in Keynsham, and Chris Masters will actually present.
Oh, sorry, Rebecca.
Thank you, Chair. Item number 3 on the agenda this morning is a Section 73 variation application at Great Barn Court, Danes Lane. The original permission was approved unanimously by committee, and the proposal was for the erection of 10 affordable apartments, associated access, drainage and landscaping works. Those were in 2 blocks. So this is an outline of the site. It's located within the Keynsham Conservation Area. It's located from private land which forms the car park of the Tesco store. There's a number of listed buildings in the vicinity as well. I've been asked to give a brief run-over of the history of the site. So as you can see there, the original permission was granted in May 2024. Subsequently, there have been applications to discharge conditions from that permission. There's been a previous Section 73, which proposed a number of changes. Sorry, my screen's gone black here. There we go. And then there's been a non-material amendment application as well. So just to run through the changes that each of those made. The first, Section 73, made changes to the design of the gables on Block 1. It also reduced the footprint of Block 2. Removed the 3rd storey from Block 2, as well as the undercroft, which resulted in the roof pitch being amended. There were some changes to the windows of Block 2, and also then subsequent changes from those to the internal building layouts and the landscaping. The non-material amendment simply, because the material schedule had been approved, amended that by changing the roof tile supplier. So the changes proposed under this current application can be summarised as the amendment to the construction management plan, showing a revised layout of the site huts, and that's proposed in order to aid build out of the scheme without the site huts being in the way. There's a slight update to the position of Block 2 and the finished floor levels. The change is that it will be moved 500 millimetres to the east and 200 millimetres to the north. There's a updated boundary treatment. This is the northern boundary treatment, which is changing from a closed bordered fence to a wall. A change to the surface material for the car parking, which is changing from brick pavers to tarmac, and some information has been presented which allows for the discharge of condition 4, meaning that condition can be, no further information is required for submission in terms of that. So, some comparison plans. This is the construction management plan. As approved on the left there, you can see the site offices are dotted about the site. Those are then rationalised in the current proposal at the access to the site so that build-out can be achieved more easily. In terms of the boundary treatment and the change to the surfacing materials, these, I can say, are shown on the submitted plans. They basically look identical. There's a couple of annotations that are changed, one saying closed bordered fence on the left, and the one on the right says that it will be the rendered wall, and then the surfacing material as well. The wall will be rendered on both sides using the same material as that used for the dwellings, and I've provided a copy of the sample that was provided as part of the materials schedule at the bottom. Essentially, it's going to be rendered in chalk white colour. So I know we were unable to access the site for a site visit, but I have taken some photos from the surrounding area. These are from adjoining land to the kind of side of the plot, looking towards the wall that's proposed. So it would be either side of that garage. These are the site offices. They appear to be currently in situ as applied for. And then this is just a view of the site from both ends of the footpath, which is currently closed. So the scheme's supported by the Town Council. It has no objection from third parties. Officers find that the changes proposed are acceptable, and therefore the recommendation is to permit the application.
Any questions on this at all? Councillor Gawley.
Yeah, I have a question about the moving from paved to tarmac finishes. I have a question about the permeability of that and the runoff, and whether there's any consideration given now or in the future to swales or to rain gardens to absorb the water rather than it just running off into the road and into the drains and causing issues for the future.
Yeah, thank you. I should have specified the material proposed is a permeable tarmac, so the runoff from the site would be the same as current under the approved plans, both are permeable materials.
Any further questions? None. It's open for debate. Can I see a mover? Councillor Hughes.
Yeah, I'm happy to move the officer's recommendations on this one.
A seconder? Councillor Warren. Any debate on this item? Move to the vote then. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Next item we're on then is Trakenhawk, Packhorse Lane, South Stoke. And I think it's you again, Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully this goes smoother with less technical issues. Item number 4 before you is a proposal to enlarge an existing balcony at Trakenhawk in South Stoke. The site's located within the Cotswold National Landscape, Bristol Bath Green Belt, the South Stoke Conservation Area, and in proximity to a number of listed buildings. On the left-hand side of the screen here, I've outlined the site in red. Also, I've included on that plan the surrounding listed buildings, grade 2, which are filled with green and grade 2 star, which are filled with yellow. The plan on the right there is the proposed block plan. So the existing balcony is located at the front of the dwelling. The proposal is to extend that forward by approximately 1.5 metres, and it's not going to be increased in width any further across the dwelling. So plans of the proposed development, existing at the top there and proposed at the bottom. So you can see in red where the balcony would come forward. It does say on the plan that the building materials are to be timber posts, and the balustrading would match the existing. So appearance-wise, it would be very similar to what's currently there. Existing and proposed floor plans here, showing that the balcony is proposed to come forward and wouldn't be any wider than currently proposed. And I've included some photos on the following slides. So the main concerns, I haven't received any concerns or any comments or representations from third parties. I have received concerns from the parish council, which were included in the officer report. Those were on the basis of potential harm to heritage assets, residential amenity, and potential harm to ecology because of external lighting in particular. So just picking up on the current situation in terms of residential amenity, this is a view from the existing balcony towards the neighbouring dwelling. As you can see, it's on the front of the building. There are windows which exist currently. The views are at quite an oblique angle. This is the front of the dwelling. So we've got quite a terraced appearance. The existing balcony is shown at the top there. Views out across the street. So all of these views are currently achievable from the existing balcony towards dwellings which are on the opposite side of kind of public space there. These also are views towards the listed buildings, including the church. And these are the adjoining dwellings. So originally they were built as a set of 3 bungalows. They've all been kind of modified over time. To specify, I haven't found any planning history for the middle one, but the one on the left has been amended, as has Tregon Hawk. Some further photos. This is taken on the left from beneath the existing balcony, where the balcony would project out to. So that is hopefully able to give a bit of an impression of the amount of kind of field of view that would be achieved towards that window. And the one on the right shows the view the opposite way. So again, I've been asked to give a little bit of background on planning history for these dwellings. So the property itself has been extended with a loft and rear dormer, and the existing balcony, as well as some other installation of a flue, other alterations in 2021. The property on the left-hand side of the row of 3 bungalows has also been enlarged. It appears that one of those applications was dealt with by committee in 2011. It subsequently had applications refused and dismissed at appeal for alterations to their parking area at street level. Based on the assessment against the various matters set out in the officer report, heritage impacts, character and appearance, residential amenity, ecology, it's felt that the application is acceptable in terms of all policies and therefore is recommended for permission.
Thank you. Jeffrey Davies, please.
Good morning, councillors. Thank you for taking the time to consider this application and helping South Stoke Parish Council to resolve the sort of conflict between our residents that arises from this proposal. The essence of the decision is to resolve the desires of the applicant against the concerns of the neighbours with whom I have discussed the application. All those neighbours have expressed their concerns and unhappiness with the proposal, as they will be overlooked and lose significant privacy if this is permitted. The officer has considered the residential amenity, and his statement was, regards as being given on the potential for the development to result in a loss of privacy for nearby residential occupiers. In this instance, the addition is located at the front of the dwelling. Any windows it faces would be on the fronts of properties and visible from the public realm. That's not a complete picture of the situation. From the plans provided, it's clear that there will exist lines of sight from the front of the proposed balcony to both the immediate neighbouring properties of Upper Cottages and the neighbouring bungalow Sumas in Sumo. The balcony is at the same height as those windows of the main living accommodation of these properties, and which at present cannot be looked into from the public realm. Someone stood at the front of the balcony would be visible from these properties and would have a clear view into those properties' windows. The officer's assessment is also incomplete in that the balcony faces forward to the properties opposite at the height of their bedroom windows. That's Russell House and Alderley Cottage, both listed in the conservation area appraisal. There will be increased visibility into all the gardens of the opposite properties, such as the Grade 2 listed Priory, Russell House, Alderley Cottage, the Gatehouse. So some loss of privacy would be perceived by all of these. All are either listed or noted in the conservation area appraisal. There's increased visibility and lack of privacy to the immediate neighbours' gardens. In addition, Sumas in Sumo and Upper Cottages. So in conclusion, we do not agree that the proposal accords with policy D6 of the placemaking plan, as there's significant harm from overlooking for existing residents. Given the prominence of the proposed balcony in the centre of the village, we do not consider that it enhances the character of the surrounding conservation area or the setting of the various listed buildings. We question whether it has special
I have
regard.
stopped you now, you're well over time, okay?
Sorry. Okay.
Can I call Richard Harlow, please? Your time starts now.
Chairs, members of the committee, thank you for your time, and thank you for allowing me to speak in support of this application, which seeks permission to widen the existing balcony from Mr and Mrs Carter's home. This is a modest, proportionate proposal to improve an existing dwelling within the South Stoke Conservation Area and Bath Greenbelt. The purpose is to simply make the current balcony 1.5 metres wider, more usable, with no change in height, massing or overall scale of the property. Importantly, the officer's report concludes that the proposal does not constitute inappropriate development in the Greenbelt. The report clearly states that it would not harm openness or conflict with the purposes of the Greenbelt, fully complying with core strategy CP8, placemaking plan GB1 and local plan policy GB3. In terms of design and character, the balcony has a lightweight appearance and will sit comfortably amongst the existing stone retaining terraces using materials to match the existing balcony. The proposal is therefore found to maintain the character and appearance of both the host dwelling and the surrounding conservation area, satisfying policies D1 to D5 of the local plan. Regarding residential amenity, the officer's report finds no unacceptable overlooking or loss of privacy, noting that the balcony faces the front of other dwellings already visible from the public realm, and that the degree of separation remains sufficient to prevent any harm. The scheme therefore accords with policy D6 of the placemaking plan. Contrary to the parish comments there, no neighbours have raised objection during the actual consultation process, and so that we were unaware of their concerns. The parish have raised concerns about potentially lighting and ecological impacts. We confirm that no external lighting is proposed. The officer's report explicitly states that given its siting, scale and nature, the proposed development is not considered reasonably likely to impact any protected species. This means the proposal is fully policy compliant, respectful of the green belt and the conservation area, has been recommended for approval by the case officer. In summary, the application before you represents a careful, well-designed enhancement to an existing home, modest in scale, visually unobtrusive and policy compliant across all key areas: design, amenity, greenbelt and heritage. On that basis, I respectfully ask members to support the officer's recommendation to permit this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions for officers? Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. I guess the question, is what's the point? What's the purpose? It's not creating any more space underneath. So it's not extending a room underneath the balcony. It's purely to extend the width of the balcony. Is that correct?
I believe the purpose of the application is that in its current kind of as constructed form, the opening of the doors conflicts with the use of what balcony is currently there. So the purpose of this application is relatively simply to make a usable amenity space at the front of the dwelling.
But the space underneath the balcony isn't going to be used, it's not going to be usable space.
It wouldn't be any more usable than it currently is.
So the purpose of this application is to change the use of the balcony then, from its current use, which is, I guess, is predominantly an access point, to something bigger that could be used for seating and that type of arrangement.
When I visited the site, there was seats positioned on the balcony already. It can accommodate chairs. It's simply, a case that you have to move those chairs and kind of step over them in order to get the doors open.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Jackson?
I'm sorry, I've forgotten which way the balcony faces. Is it to the south? In which case, of course, if it was me, there'd be pots of tomato plants in that extra space. But it's south, right, thanks.
Okay, if there's no further questions, open debate. Councillor Gawley?
Thank you. It's an interesting one, this one. I think I haven't heard from the neighbours either, and I can see they haven't objected, but obviously the clerk has been to talk to them as is proper. And I can understand why the applicants want to make a more usable space, although they, I suppose, could have changed the doors, but you can't get a table there. So I think in theory I can understand why they're doing it. I would wonder whether we could attach conditions so that the neighbours, particularly in Sumas and Sumo, can't be overlooked, whether there could be some sort of obscure glazing. I know that's been used elsewhere in the village, or a trellis or something like that. I think the views over Russell House, Alderley Cottages and so on, you can already look into their windows from the balcony because you can sit there. So that's not so much of a concern, but I am concerned about the neighbours next door. And so therefore I would wonder if we were to go forward with this, whether some conditions could be attached.
Have you moved approval with conditions? Are you moving approval with conditions?
I guess so, yes.
Thank Would the seconder, please? Councillor Jackson. Seconding? Do you want to speak there?
Well, I can see the apprehensions that people might have, but I can't see that this is such a substantial increase that it's going to change the conditions for the neighbours. And again, as I said in the last application, it's a question of which way you are standing. If you, I can see that it does impact to some extent, but not very much, I don't think, on the listed buildings and the heritage section, the other side of the road. But if you're standing the other side of the road with your back to the church, what's changed? So I'm happy to second.
Councillor Hughes?
Yeah, I do have concerns. This sits in a very prominent and a very dominant position, overlooking not so much the neighbours either side, but on the opposite side of the road, below, there are a number of cottages. Now, I know they already have an element of overlooking from this, but by extending this and making it into a more usable area, my concern is that will create a lot more activity on that balcony that doesn't exist now. Tables, chairs, that type, and will affect their amenity by that very nature of it becoming a more usable space. So I'm still very concerned about this one.
Councillor Simon?
Yes, I support Councillor Gurley's suggestion that there should be investigation of the need for a panel of obscure glass to the right of the balcony. That seems a reasonable ask. The other condition I'd like to see is no external lighting condition. But with those two conditions, I'd be happy to support it.
Any further speakers? Councillor Warren?
Yeah, I was kind of going along with this, but I'm not sure about the obscure glass. How does that fit? I know I didn't apply for that. How does it fit in an old-fashioned house? Not quite sure obscure glass is the right answer, really. I get the idea about the overlooking quite. However, I imagine anyone sitting on the balcony will be looking that way, not making it to look down at the neighbours, to be honest with you. So I'd have been happy to go along with the officer's recommendation as is. But I said, I'm not quite sure how you work the obscure glass bit into it.
Councillor Jackson?
Well, you know, we live with climate change. I can't help feeling that having a panel of obscure glass could potentially create a fire hazard on the other side, but I'm not very gender.
Okay, I think where we actually are. Chris, do you want to come in? He's in line.
Yeah, I'm going to invite the case officer to just offer an opinion about a privacy screen condition. I think there might not necessarily be obscurely glazing. I don't know the site well enough to know whether that is, one, feasible or two, sort of reasonable, and whether that might have other impacts. But Chris, would you be able to opine on that?
Thank you, Chris. So during the course of the application, on receipt of the comments from the parish council, the architect did suggest that they may be willing to consider proposing a privacy screen. My consideration of the application was that the impacts on the neighbour, and I think principally the privacy screen would afford privacy to those neighbours at the side. The impact on them, because of the existing situation where we've got terraces at a lower level, we've got a balcony already, we've got oblique angles, it's only a very slight part of the room that views exist into. It's at the front of the dwelling where properties already have views towards those windows from less oblique angles. The impact of the proposal by extending the balcony out is, in my professional opinion, very slight. For that reason, I've come to the conclusion that actually the privacy screen and the bulk and the massing and the visual impact that that would have outweighs the impact on residential amenity, and therefore I haven't included it, I haven't taken that any further. It would be reasonable to condition for that plan to be amended, I don't see any particular issue with that. Obviously, we would just have to consider the implications that that screen would have. In terms of the impact on the neighbours on the opposite side of the road, again, there's terraces and large amounts of usable amenity space that the dwelling benefits from. There's a high degree of separation, and speaking to residents on that side of the street myself, they did say actually because of the way our windows are positioned in our dwellings, we can actually see up to the height where the balcony is. In terms of the condition for external lighting, the current situation is that the applicant could put ancillary, lighting, as any of us can, outside our dwellings. They could put lighting on that terrace. They have expressly said that there is no lighting proposed as part of this relatively small-scale proposal. We can attach a condition, but my personal view on that is that that would not be appropriate given the scale of the development and the existing situation.
Can I get a reaction from Councillor Gorvally first, what's been said?
Thank you. I appreciate the fact the architects have offered to look at screening, and bearing in mind the lightweight nature of the metal framing, I would imagine something could be done that would be helpful. And I think in terms of neighbourly goodwill, I think that would be much appreciated if that could be a condition. In terms of lighting, there are other houses in the village, and in fact there's one particularly large one on the other side of the valley where they light the trees, which is appalling. So frankly, I think that, bearing in mind the protected characteristics of bats, particularly in that area, I think the idea of not having external lighting is a good idea. I hope that's clear.
Chris?
Yes, just I don't want to extend this any further than have to or make it more awkward, but it's a very helpful opinion from the officer in relation to the privacy screen. My concern is by putting a condition on, given the officer says there is potential for impacts arising from that screen onto the neighbour, and I appreciate your comments that it could be designed in a way that wouldn't impact. I think given the plans currently don't show that, and neighbours have not had an opportunity to comment on a privacy screen, the view from the officers up here is that if you were going to go down that route, you would need to defer the item to get that amendment to bring it back in front of you. Otherwise, it would be prejudicial to those neighbours and it would potentially be an unlawful decision. On the lighting condition, I agree with the officer it's not necessary, but I think you could apply that condition because it's not prejudicing anyone. Apologies if that's inconvenient, but that is just the legal advice.
Okay, Councillor Jackson.
There's lighting and there's lighting. People have these little sort of lamps around their patios in the evenings sometimes, and I can't see that would do any harm either to nature or the neighbours. So I'm reluctant to see the condition about lighting, which is presumably meant as sort of full-scale, football ground lighting, and obviously we're not thinking about that. And re the privacy thing, I think this is being rather unreasonable too, because you could actually achieve the same thing by having a sunshade, if they're going to have a little table out there, and just tilt it away so that the neighbours don't see them scoffing their nice barbecue food. Or you could, which would be my option, of course, to put a trellis across and a fast-growing clematis. But I don't think we should be so prescriptive, and I prefer to leave the conditions out.
Okay, I'm going to ask Councillor Gore to sum up on a motion with conditions, then we go to a vote.
Okay, as far as I understand it, we'd have to bring it back if we were to have some sort of privacy screening, although frankly I'm with Councillor Jackson and a fast-growing clematis. And actually, there's some very good gardeners around that area, so I'm sure that could be achieved in terms of the spirit of good neighbourliness, and I get neighbourliness, and obviously we can't have a condition about lighting either. Is that correct?
So you're dropping the conditions, are you?
I guess so, on the advice of the officers.
Okay, so we're going to the vote now on this item. Approve unconditionally. Those in favour, please. 7. Those against. 1. That's carried. We're now on to the last item on the agenda, and it is 54 Uplands, Saltford. Pippa, I'm sorry you kept us waiting so long.
Thank you, Chair. So this application is for a shed and a fence at 54 Uplands Road, which is in a residential area of Saltford. The application is retrospective, but we have sought some amendments to the scheme through the planning application. So there is an existing and proposed scheme on the presentation. So this shows the site location plan. So number 54, which is obviously within the red line of the site, and the shed is within the sort of south eastern corner of the site, and it is a sort of irregular shape in order to fit into that gap. So the application has been brought to committee because the parish council have objected on the basis of a number of things, character and appearance of the area, and due to some highway safety concerns, but we'll go into that along the way. So the picture on the right shows just a bit more of a close-up image of the shed and the fence, which is along the boundary, as you can see, with the boundary with Uplands Road. So these are existing and proposed elevations of the fence, which shows the whole development. So the shed is actually sited behind the fence, and as you can see from the plan here, you aren't able to see very much of the shed as it currently is. Officers considered that the current fencing has a large bulk, and obviously it is noted that it is quite long, but that does go along the boundary of the garden, which is quite large. So we consider that it's sufficient to accommodate the shed in this location, and also that the fencing does provide some screening. So the proposed elevations are what we have worked with the applicant to agree to alter the fencing, because we believe that the stepping down of the fence, as can be seen in the elevation, does break up the visual appearance of the fence, and does soften its appearance. So the inclusion of a 30 centimetre trellis on top of the existing fence does sort of soften the appearance and is in accordance with other fences in the locale. So it's important to note that they're not actually adding the trellis on top of the existing fence. They're just proposing to cut it down and add a trellis on top, which would make the overall height much the same as it currently is, but it would obviously change the visual appearance. So this is the elevation and sort of floor plan of the shed. So it is obviously currently in situ, and it is the way it's located is that the land within the plot is set down slightly from the street, which it would be why it's not overly visible in the street scene. So it is an unusual shape, and it's my understanding that the applicants have just designed this so that it fits in that gap, and they've got some area behind that they use for other storage as well. So here are some photos of the shed and the fence from within the plot. So this sort of, the photo on the left shows the way the land does slope up towards that corner, but does slope away towards the house. So I appreciate it's not necessarily the most attractive from the inside, but that is the fence on the right-hand side you can see, and the shed in situ. Here are some pictures from the outside, from the actual street, so along Uplands Road, where you can see the fence as it is. So these pictures were taken when I visited the site as part of an enforcement case in, I think it was January this year. So obviously it is much the same as it is now. So this is an image from the neighbouring property, so looking north along Uplands Road. So that's sort of as the street sort of slopes away a little bit, and you can see it is one continuous stretch at the moment, but obviously that would be altered if this scheme were to be permitted. These are some street view images from the council's street view showing, as you can see in the top map, the sort of fan shows the direction that you're looking. So this looks south along Uplands Road, and you can see in the picture beneath that the shed and the fence are on the left, and is important context that there is another fence opposite the property at number 73 Uplands Road, which was granted permission in 2017. So that is sort of what we've modelled the proposed trellis fence combination on, would be that fence across the road. So this is the same kind of view, but just slightly further up the street, showing the curve of the road, which is a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, and the two fences on either side. And this is a view looking the other way, so from, well, I suppose it's kind of north, Uplands Road, northwest, looking from the sort of point of view of the neighbouring property. So the property you can see in the right-hand corner of the bottom picture is, yeah, the immediate neighbour to the host dwelling. So it's obviously a very different style and has much different sort of layout in terms of the garden and the garage, but the outbuilding would be located very close to that garage. This is an image just looking down, well, I suppose up Uplands Road towards number, I think it is 77 Uplands Road, where there is a similar fence, which is, as you can see, quite long in the bottom image. So it's not clear that that fence had planning permission. However, it has been there since at least 2017, so it would be lawful through the passage of time. So I did mention that in the report, that both fences referred to are now lawful, which demonstrates that it may be acceptable in this location. So the officer recommendation is to permit the application, obviously with the amendments shown in the plans.
Questions, officer? Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. This, we're looking at both a fence and a very large outbuilding shed, or whatever we're calling it, and we're looking those as one job lot. We're not looking at whether the fence should be there and the buildings remain, or vice versa. It's a whole package.
Oh, yes, it is. Yeah, the whole thing. So the shed, obviously, it is retrospective. So they have come in with the application for the shed and the fence, and we consider that the fence would be necessary to consider with the shed. Okay.
And the parish council have referred to an application on the opposite side of the road that was refused. So from a point of consistency, do we feel that we're being consistent by looking to permit this when we've refused a development on the opposite side of the road for garages.
Yeah, that is a point that is noted, and as you say, the parish council did mention that in their objection. I would say that with this particular site, I'll just go back to one of the plans. Oh, maybe this is a good one to show it. You can see in the sort of image above, the map kind of image, there are a cluster of outbuildings quite close to where the proposed outbuilding would go. So, for example, you can't see the number on it, but the property immediately next door, number 52 Uplands Road, has got this garage and another outbuilding, which the proposed outbuilding would be immediately next to, whereas so it's considered different to the one across the road where there are not actually a cluster of development outbuildings. So I think we could see those two as slightly different. The setting of the building would be slightly different, even though it is obviously in a similar location.
Thank you. And finally, can I just ask, so one of the properties opposite has had a fence approved and put in place of a similar height, but that fence was, there was already a hedge the same height before the fence went in, so it didn't actually change the aspect in terms of height. The hedge was already that's height before the fence went in. Is that correct?
I think so, yeah, I think that is correct.
Whereas this one just had the very low wall. I mean, I'm just going to Google Street View, which still shows it before the fence and the shed were put in place. And I'll be honest, it looks lovely. So there is a difference between that application opposite for a fence of that height and this one, where it was only a low wall. Correct.
That is correct, yeah. It's just important to note that we can't see that there is a reason why the owners of this property couldn't build a fence under permitted development, which would be up to 1 metre in height. So even though there wasn't a fence there previously, and also, like you say, there was no hedge, it is possible they would be able to build some boundary treatment without the need for planning permission. As far as we don't know there's a restriction on that, so,
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any further questions? It's open for debate. Councillor Gawley?
Well, I think this is definitely a place for fast-growing clematis, but there you go.
Councillor Hughes?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's quite tricky. Having seen what it looked like before with just a low wall, and I appreciate that they could have put up a 1 metre fence, and that could have suited the location as well. But what they have put in is it doesn't fit with the street scene. It is detrimental. It has affected the outlook of the area, the character and appearance. I don't think adding a trellis to the top really solves anything, because behind that fence is an outbuilding, and all you're doing is exposing the building behind by adding the trellis. So I'm not sure that that's a suitable solution. So at this point, I'm just not supportive of any of this application, retrospective or not.
Okay, anybody else? We're looking for a motion. Councillor Jackson.
I gave this quite a lot of thought because it is prominent, but on the other hand, it means you don't see I was going to say the shed, you don't see the outbuilding, which I don't think we are minded to say should be removed or demolished. So what are the alternatives? We wouldn't be doing anything if there was a thick beech hedge along where the fence is now, or these wretched fast-growing conifers, but both of them will protrude over what is a very narrow pavement. So I think all ends up, we really ought to take advantage of the enforcement legislation and recommend that the officer exercises discretion, and we do not enforce, because it seems a bit tough for this family to have enforcement when the other two were not, obviously under different regimes, but still I think for fairness and for convenience and for the fact that it doesn't really materially harm the area, we should actually not enforce. So we do not accept the officer's recommendation.
Anybody else? So I'm looking at on the table. Councillor Simon.
I mean, it may be that we agree that we don't think imposition of a trellis is required and that the existing construction is not so unacceptable to remain on the street scene. But I wouldn't be with Councillor Jackson in terms of not enforcing. I would want this family to benefit from the permission that makes a positive decision, either that we accept the officer's recommendation or we modify it so that it's a close-boarded fence with a smooth profile rather than the stepped trellis. But I think leaving it as unlawful development that is enforced against is the worst of all possible worlds.
Okay. So I really still haven't got a through motion on the table. Councillor McPhee. Okay, that's a recommendation, that was not enforced, so. Chris, please go ahead.
So the recommendation, the officer's recommendation is to permit the planning application. This is not, the committee is not here to make a decision on whether we take enforcement action or not. So we have a planning application in front of us to grant planning permission for the fence and the shed, as amended with the trellis, as shown by the officer. And as I said, the officer's recommendation is to permit. So the motion should either be to agree with the officer's recommendation or something alternative.
Councillor Jackson.
You might be seen to be condoning what has been put there if you do it that way around, but I'm happy to move it anyway.
To permit? To permit the application?
Yes.
Okay. Councillor McPhee?
Yeah, I think I'm the same. I would have preferred it with the trellis, I think, because it's the same one.
That's what it will be.
That's the motion. We'll give you the trellis. I don't feel desperate about it, but I think it doesn't do any harm to do something.
So you seconded that, didn't you?
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Warren?
Yeah, again, it's a bit of a hard one because, again, there's two sides to every fence. And it's pig ugly from the outside. I'm sorry, I'm not a qualified architect, so I probably can't say that, but in my view, I think it has one ugly fence. So I couldn't help that, Toby. And I think the trellis will improve it. However, if you're walking past it, it ain't very pretty, and looking at what we've got there, looking at Sean's now, it looks lovely in the past. However, if you're inside, it's sitting outside your house, everyone's walking past looking at you. Where if you have the fence, you've got a bit of privacy. So on that side of it, if you're living in the house, it's great from the inside out. So I think I will go along with the officer's recommendation. Yeah.
Okay. Any other speakers? Councillor Hughes?
Yeah, I mean, I do genuinely get what you're saying about this, and it would be a big step to refuse this. I don't agree. I mean, on your basis, all of the houses along this road will all have 6-foot fences to stop people looking in through their lounge windows, which would be awful. But looking at what it was like before any of this happened, if this hadn't been retrospective and they'd put this application on the table, I would have voted against it. So that's where I am. But I do agree that it is where it is now. Whether the trellis or not enhances that, I don't know. I'm in two minds on this one completely.
Okay, on the table we've got a motion to permit. Chris, please, yes.
Just very briefly, just to pick up on something Councillor Hughes says, in terms of how you treat this application, because it's retrospective, you treat it the same way as you would any application, even if it weren't retrospective. I just wanted to be clear on that.
Okay, we're going to the vote on the motion to permit. Those in favour? 6 in favour, those against? 2 against. That is carried. That brings us towards the end of the meeting. We've got one or two more to deal with. And I think that's the appeals report. Please, Chris.
Just to say, there's a bit in the report that says forthcoming hearings and inquiry about parcel 3263 at Dean Hill Lane, an enforcement appeal. The hearing for that's taken place, and we've actually had the result in yesterday, and that was dismissed, and represents another dismissed enforcement appeal, which we've had a handful of recently. So the enforcement team have been getting some great success recently.
9, quarterly performance report. Anybody? Comments, anybody? There are none. So date of the next meeting will be Monday, next meeting is 19th of November 2025. Thank you all for attending, and Councillor Ward, can you stop the bad jokes next time, please? Be appreciated. Very quick, briefly.